Welcome back to the deep dive. There's a specific kind of horror story that I think actually scares us more than ghosts or monsters or, things that go bump in the night.
Hmm.
It's that story where you look in the mirror and the reflection that's looking back at you, it isn't you,
Right.
or at least it's not who you think you are.
It's the classic stranger in the mirror trope.
Yeah.
And it's so effective because it hits on a really, really primal fear, which is the fear of losing control.
Yeah.
The fear that we are not, in fact, the masters of our own house.
Exactly. And today, for this deep dive, we are not talking about horror movies. We're talking about something that is, I would argue, the most fundamental mystery of the human condition.
It really is.
Why do smart, rational, decent people who swear they have their lives together, suddenly do incredibly stupid or dangerous or just completely out of character things the moment the heat gets turned up?
And when we say heat, it's important to clarify, we aren't just talking about, temperature. We're talking about the heat of emotion, the heat of passion, hunger, anger, all these physiological states that just seem to hijack the controls of our brain.
Right. And for this, we're looking at a fascinating set of excerpts today from The Problem of Procrastination and Self-Control, which focuses really heavily on this behavioral economics perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very center of this research is a hypothetical guy the text just calls Roy.
Poor Roy. He really gets put through the ringer in this research. He's sort of the everyman, the stand-in for all of us.
He really is. But if you look at Roy's life on paper, you'd say, okay, this is a solid guy. He's smart, he's decent, he pays his taxes, loves his wife.
Right.
In his daily life, his frontal lobes are firing on all cylinders. He is the captain of his own ship. He makes lists, he follows rules.
Roy is the person we all believe we are.
Yeah.
He's the person who, makes a budget on Sunday night and thinks, this week, I'm sticking to it.
Yes. He's the one who plans a diet and actually meal preps for Monday and Tuesday.
Right. He respects boundaries. He understands social contracts. This is what the researchers call the cold state Roy.
But then the research throws a massive curveball. It puts Roy in a completely different state, specifically a state of high sexual arousal. And suddenly, Roy becomes, unrecognizable.
It's a total transformation. I mean, it's not just a mood swing. The data suggests it's more like a personality transplant.
And the text suggests that when this heat is applied, Roy's rational brain, the one that makes the budgets, effectively just shuts off. He throws all caution to the wind.
Everything. He risks his health, his future, his reputation, everything he claims to value in the cold light of day just for a moment of immediate gratification.
And so the core mission of this deep dive is really to unpack that transformation. Because the scary thing isn't just that Roy changes. I mean, we all know we act differently when we're emotional.
Sure. We've all said things we didn't mean when we were angry or upset.
Exactly. The scary thing, and this is the key insight right from the jump, is that Cool Roy seems to have absolutely no clue that Hot Roy even exists. He can't predict him.
It's a total blind spot. It's a literal Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde scenario living inside one person.
That's the central metaphor the source material uses, and it just fits perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does. Dr. Jekyll is us in our cold state, rational, logical, moral, forward thinking. And Mr. Hyde is us in that hot state, emotional, hungry, aroused, angry, impulsive.
And the research is very clear that the gap between these two selves, it's not just a little crack in the pavement.
It's a massive canyon, an abyss.
A canyon that we fall into over and over and over again. And we seem surprised every single time we hit the bar.
We do. We never seem to learn.
There was this one statistic right at the beginning of the reading that it stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just about behaving badly, it was about prediction.
Oh, yes.
The text says that when we're calm, we predict our future behavior wrong. And not just by a little bit.
By a large margin, as the researchers put it, we are, for all intents and purposes, strangers to ourselves.
Strangers to ourselves. That's a great way to put it.
We look at our future selves and we say, oh, I'll be fine. I'll make the right choice. I'll stick to the diet. I'll use protection. And the data says unequivocally, no, you won't. You fundamentally misunderstand who you become when the chemicals start flowing.
So we have to unpack this. Because I think it's easy to hear Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and think, okay, that's a nice metaphor, that's literature. But this isn't just philosophical musing, is it?
Not at all.
The source material details a study that actually tried to measure this Hyde effect scientifically.
This is the famous Berkeley sexual arousal study. And it's one of those studies that when you read the methodology, you kind of wonder how it ever got past an ethics committee.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
But the insights it produced are just undeniable.
The methodology is, well, it's unique. I don't think I've ever read a study design quite like this. It's incredibly hands-on.
It had to be. To really get at the gap between Jekyll and Hyde, the researchers knew they couldn't just ask people hypothetical questions in a classroom.
Right, because you'd just get Jekyll's answers.
They'd just get Jekyll's answers. They needed to catch people in both states. They needed what's called a within-subject design, which means they compare you to you.
Okay, so let's walk through how they set this up. Step 1. They recruit a group of male students from UC Berkeley.
Right. And, knowing Berkeley, this implies a certain demographic. These are bright kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're likely open-minded, educated, probably fairly liberal, but they are, for all intents and purposes, good, rational people.
Mm.
They're the Dr. Jekylls of the world.
So they bring these students in, and they ask them a series of questions in a cold state. So this is just like a normal Tuesday afternoon sitting in a quiet room filling out a survey.
Exactly. No stimuli, just pure logic.
Mm.
And the questions they asked were, well, they were intense.
They weren't messing around.
No. They asked about their sexual preferences, their willingness to take certain risks, and even some very, very pointed questions about immoral behavior and illegal acts.
And in this cold state, how did they answer? What was the baseline?
The baseline was exactly as you expect Dr. Jekyll to answer. Very rational, very moral.
I would never.
Right. No, I wouldn't do that. That's risky.
Yeah.
That's not me. I always use protection. I respect boundaries. I have very specific preferences. It's all very controlled and logical.
Okay, so that establishes the baseline. That's the cool state morality. That's the guy who thinks he's in charge.
Yeah.
Then comes step 2. And this is where science gets a little awkward.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. They needed to induce a hot state. But they couldn't just, show them a picture or have them watch a clip. They needed genuine high-level physiological arousal.
This wasn't about just getting them interested. They needed the full biological cascade.
Precisely. So they instructed the participants, in privacy obviously, to stimulate themselves to a state of high sexual arousal.
And just to be crystal clear, because the mechanism here is everything, they are asking these students to get themselves to the brink of climax in a lab setting.
Yes. The goal was about 75% of their maximum arousal level.
Uh-huh.
And then, and this is the truly diabolical part of the design, right at that peak moment when the brain is flooded with dopamine and hormones and everything else,
Yeah.
they had to stop and answer the exact same questions again.
That sounds incredibly frustrating for the students, first of all. I can't imagine the level of sheer annoyance.
I'm sure it was. But for the sake of science, it was a goldmine. Because now the researchers weren't asking Dr. Jekyll anymore.
No.
They were asking Mr. Hyde. They were getting answers directly from the reptilian brain.
They're trying to see if the personality actually changes when the chemicals are flooding the brain, or if we just get a little bit more impulsive, a little more risk tolerant.
Exactly. And the results are, frankly, shocking. I've looked at a lot of behavioral studies, and usually you're excited if you find a 5 or 10% variance to prove a hypothesis.
Right, people are 10% more likely to buy the red box.
Precisely. But when you look at the data tables provided in the source, specifically Appendix Table 1, we are not seeing 10% shifts. We are seeing massive, fundamental alterations in their perception of reality.
Okay, so let's dig into some of these specifics, because massive almost feels like an understatement from what I read. One of the categories was attraction to unconventional partners or scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Things that, in a cold state, these students would have said they had absolutely zero interest in.
Right. So, for example, they asked about the likelihood of being attracted to a 12-year-old girl.
That's a heavy question. That's a huge taboo. It's illegal.
Extremely. It's designed to be a hard line. Now, in the cold state, interest is obviously very, very low, almost non-existent. The moral compass is pointing north.
As you'd hope.
As you would hope. But in the aroused state, the affirmative response, so the willingness to even say, yes, I might find that attractive, that jumped by 100%.
100%. It doubled.
It doubled.
Yeah. That's terrifying. Even from a low baseline, the fact that the needle moves at all on that question is deeply unsettling.
And it gets more extreme. They asked about the idea of having sex with a 60-year-old woman. Now, remember, these are college-aged guys.
Right.
So in the cold state, they're not interested. It's not their demographic.
Yeah.
But in the hot state, the difference was 229%.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just that they're preferences are shifting a little bit at the margins. It's like the actual boundaries of their type are completely dissolving.
That's a great way to put it. The filter is gone. The rational brain says, I have a type, I have standards, I have an age range. The hot brain just says, I want gratification.
The specifics don't matter as much.
They don't. And it wasn't just age, it was also about the emotional connection. They asked, could you enjoy sex with someone you hated?
So someone you actively disliked, like
Right.
a rival or an enemy.
Yes. In the cold state, the answer is generally no. Why would you want intimacy with someone you hate? It doesn't compute. But in the hot state, that jumped by 45%.
So the person doesn't even matter anymore. The act is the only thing that matters. It's like the human element is being stripped away.
And it goes even further into what the study calls deviant activities. Interest in things like bondage or spanking increased significantly. Even something as taboo as sexual contact with animals saw a 167% increase in the aroused state.
Okay, hold on. I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Does this mean these students are all secretly deviants? Are they just lying to themselves and everyone else in the cold state? Is Mr. Hyde the real them and Dr. Jekyll is just a mask they wear for society?
That is the crucial question to ask. And the expert consensus here, based on the research, is no.
Okay.
It's not that they are secretly harboring these desires 24/7. It's not that they're walking around campus suppressing the urge for animal contact.
Right.
It's that the state of arousal literally transforms their personality. The Mr. Hyde effect means that the boundaries of what is acceptable, what is interesting, and what is even possible completely shift. The filter just falls off.
It's like the lens through which they see the world changes color. In the cold state, the lens is clear, it's rational. In the hot state, everything just looks like an opportunity for gratification.
Exactly. But here is where it gets really interesting. And you could argue much, much darker. Because so far we've only talked about preferences. What turns you on? That's one thing. It's internal. But the study also asked about morality. It asked about how they would treat other people.
Right. This is the data from Table 2 in the source material. This is where we stop talking about fetishes and start talking about, social safety and consent.
Exactly. They asked about date rape scenarios.
Yeah.
Immoral behaviors.
So in the cold state, presumably these students who are, decent Berkeley kids said, no, I would never drug someone or I would never ignore a no.
Correct. Dr. Jekyll is a moral person. He understands consent. He understands the law. He has empathy for his partner.
Okay.
But look at the Hyde numbers. When asked about the willingness to slip a woman a drug to increase the chance of having sex, the affirmative response in the hot state increased by 420%.
420%.
420%.
That is, I'm sorry, I'm just stuck on that number. That's not a different person. That's not just a lapse in judgment. That's a complete collapse of the moral compass. That's a predator emerging from a regular student.
It is. And it's not an isolated data point.
Yeah.
The willingness to keep trying after a date says no. That increased by 125%.
So what is happening in the brain here? How can someone who says, I respect consent at 2 in the afternoon turn into someone who says, maybe not at 10 o'clock at night? Is the brain actually breaking?
In a way, yes. The expert insight from the text. It relies on Freud's old distinction, but it holds up pretty well in neurology too. We have the superego, that part of us that upholds social rules, morality, the voice of our parents in society.
It's the chaperone at the dance, the internal police officer.
That's a perfect way to put it. And then we have the id, or what some call the reptilian brain, the part that just wants food, sex, and safety now.
Right, the primal stuff.
It's evolutionary. It's ancient. And what this research suggests is that when we are gripped by passion, the reptilian brain screams so loud that it effectively negates the superego.
It doesn't just argue with it, it negates it.
It drowns it out entirely. It's like the security guard goes on a smoke break and leaves the vault door wide open.
Yeah.
The intellectual understanding of this is wrong might still be in there, buried somewhere deep down, but it has no power to stop the motor functions.
Wow.
The immediate drive for gratification just completely overrides any thought of long-term consequences.
And that is such a heavy concept. And it brings us right back to that prediction error we talked about at the very start.
It does.
Because the truly scary part isn't just that this happens. It's that if you ask these students 5 minutes before the experiment started, hey, if you were really aroused, do you think you'd be more willing to drug someone? They would have said, absolutely not. How dare you even ask me that?
They would be offended by the question.
They'd
They
be
genuinely believe they are incapable of it.
They were wrong about their own capacity for darkness by a huge margin.
Which leads us directly to the implications of all this. Because if we are all walking around thinking we're Jekyll, but we're actually carrying this dormant Hyde who is capable of, well, this, how does that affect things like public policy or something like sex education?
Yeah, the source material takes a very, very critical look at the just say no approach to sex ed based on this exact data. And I grew up with just say no. It was everywhere.
We all did. It was the gold standard for a long, long time.
And on the surface, it sounds so logical. If you don't want to have sex, just say no. It puts the agency on the individual. It assumes you were in control.
It sounds logical to Dr. Jekyll, and that's the fatal flaw.
Mm.
The source argues that these campaigns, abstinence, only just say no, they all rely on the faulty assumption that decisions about sex are made by the cold, rational self. They assume that when you're in the heat of the moment, heavily aroused, you can just reach for an off switch on the wall like it's a light switch.
But the Berkeley study just proved that in the heat of the moment, the rational plan completely evaporates. You aren't referencing the pledge you signed in 8th grade gym class. You are operating on raw biological instinct.
It's like teaching someone how to swim by having them sit in a classroom and watch a PowerPoint and then throwing them into a stormy ocean and expecting them to remember the lecture slides.
That's a perfect analogy. And you can see it in the other data points, right? Look at the condom usage data in Table 3.
Exactly. This is the practical application of the moral flippage data. In a hot state, the subjects were significantly less likely to care about using protection. The concern for pregnancy risks, STDs, it just vanishes.
The phrase the text uses is throwing caution to the wind, which is such a polite way of saying, I don't care about the consequences anymore.
So if just say no is a strategy designed for a brain that isn't currently driving the car, what does the source suggest we do instead? Because we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, biology wins. Good luck, everyone.
No, and the source doesn't suggest that at all. It suggests we need to completely change the strategy from one of willpower to one of management. We have to actively manage the gap between the two selves.
Right, and the source proposes a few specific strategies. The first one is simple, avoidance.
Which at first sounds a little like just say no, doesn't it?
It sounds similar, but the mechanism is fundamentally different. Just say no implies resisting temptation while you are actively facing it. It implies standing in the middle of a fire and just deciding not to get burned.
Which is impossible.
Right. Avoidance means walking away before the fire even starts.
Ah, okay. So it's the difference between staring at the chocolate cake on the counter and trying not to eat it versus just not buying the chocolate cake in the first place.
Precisely. The text explicitly says, avoiding temptation is much easier than overcoming it. Once the arousal starts, Hyde is waking up. You have to act while Jekyll is still fully in charge to ensure Hyde never gets the keys to the car.
So if you know that being alone in a particular room with a particular person leads to trouble, you don't go into the room. You don't try to go into the room and then use your willpower to resist.
Exactly. That's a losing battle.
That makes sense. But life happens. You can't always avoid every single tempting situation. What if you do find yourself in the room?
That leads to the second, and maybe more powerful strategy, pre-commitment. This is crucial. Pre-commitment means making a binding decision in the cold state that restricts the hot state's options later on.
Okay, give me a concrete example of what that looks like.
The book's example is simple. Always carrying a condom, even if you don't think you're going to get lucky that night.
Interesting. Why is that pre-commitment?
Think about it. If you rely on deciding in the moment whether to go to the store to buy one or whether to interrupt things and find one, Mr. Hyde might decide that's too much trouble.
Right.
Hyde is lazy and wants gratification now. The friction is too high. But if Dr. Jekyll puts the condom in his pocket at 9 in the morning, then Mr. Hyde has it readily available at midnight. It reduces the friction. It removes the decision-making process from the incompetent self.
You are essentially babysitting your future self. It's like you're packing a lunch for a toddler because you know they're going to get cranky and irrational at noon.
That's an ideal way to think about it, yes. And the third point the source makes is about reframing sex ed entirely.
Okay.
Less focus on the biology of the reproductive system, which, let's be honest, teenagers figure out on their own pretty quickly, and more focus on this emotional firestorm.
Right, teaching them about this psychological change itself. Hey, you are going to feel like a different person. Here is what that person is like. Here's what they're capable of.
Exactly. Recognizing that this emotional firestorm will make you stupid. If you know that ahead of time, if you've been warned, you might be slightly better equipped to handle it, or at least better equipped to avoid the trigger points.
It's about humility.
It is. It's about admitting that hot you is not as smart or as moral as cold you.
It's like giving them a map of the canyon before they get to the edge, so they at least know it's there.
A perfect metaphor.
Now, this whole concept of the hot state isn't just about sex, though. That's the most dramatic example, for sure. But the source material pivots to another area where teenagers, and honestly adults too, make terrible, often life-altering decisions.
Right, driving. The hot car.
I love this analogy because we've all been there. You're 17, you've just gotten your license. It's the ultimate feeling of freedom. But it's not just about inexperience, is it? It's about the environment inside the car.
No, not at all. The text argues that the car itself becomes a hot state environment. Think about all the sensory input. It's not just driving to the store in silence.
Right.
You have music blaring. The text specifically mentions Tupac, which dates the author a little bit, but the point stands.
It's a classic choice for inducing adrenaline, to be fair.
It is. So you have the bass thumping, you have your friends laughing and shouting in the back seat, you have hormones raging, the driver's reaching for French fries, or, as the text notes, a girlfriend's knee, all at 70 miles an hour.
It's a total sensory overload. The rational risk assessment part of the brain is just being drowned out. It's lighting up like a pinball machine.
It is. And the statistics reflect that perfectly. A teenager driving alone is already 40% more likely to crash than an adult. That's the inexperience factor.
Okay.
But look what happens when you add passengers, when you turn up the heat. With one passenger in the car, the risk of a crash doubles.
Doubles.
And with a third passenger,
Oh.
the risk doubles again.
That's the Hyde effect in action. The social pressure, the excitement, the adrenaline, it just shuts down the part of the brain that says, hey, maybe slow down.
Who's thinking about risk in that situation?
Yeah.
The text asks. And the answer is probably no one.
So just like with sex ed, simply telling a teenager drive safely as they walk out the door it's completely useless.
It is. You're talking to Jekyll in the living room, but Hyde is the one who's going to be behind the wheel with his buddies. Hyde thinks he's invincible. Hyde thinks he's in a Fast and Furious movie.
So does the source offer a solution for this? Because the carry a condom strategy doesn't really apply to a Honda Civic. How do we pre-commit to safety in a car?
It offers a fascinating, if slightly futuristic, solution. The author calls it an OnStar intervention for the cold state. It's a hypothetical system, but the logic is brilliant.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. How does this work?
The idea is a system that parents and the teen can figure together beforehand in the cold state. It's a pre-commitment mechanism. The car itself monitors the driving behavior. If the car speeds or drives erratically or makes dangerously sharp turns, the system doesn't just beep at you. It actively reacts to cool the situation down.
Cool it down. How? What does it do?
Well, the text suggests a few hilarious but incredibly effective punishments. First, the music. If you're speeding, the car automatically switches the radio from Tupac or heavy metal to Schumann's Second Symphony.
That would definitely kill the vibe. Nothing says, slow down, you're being an idiot, like a sudden, unexpected blast of classical strings.
Exactly. It completely changes the emotional context of the situation immediately. Or another one is temperature control. In the winter, if you drive recklessly, the AC blasts freezing cold air. In the summer, the heat blasts on high.
So it makes the environment physically uncomfortable. It associates the risky behavior with an unpleasant sensation.
It's pure operant conditioning. You behave badly, you get frozen, and then there's the ultimate downer, as the text calls it.
What's that?
If the driving gets too erratic, the car automatically calls mom.
Oh, that's game over. That's the nuclear option. Imagine being with your friends, trying to look cool, doing 85 down the highway, and suddenly your mom's voice is booming through the car speakers asking why you're driving like a maniac.
It would immediately and forcibly yank the driver out of the hot state and right back into the cold state. The shame alone would sober you up. It forces Mr. Hyde to move over and let Dr. Jekyll drive.
It's such a clever application of the theory. We can't trust our future selves to make the right choice in the moment, so we build a machine that makes the choice for us. We outsource our superego to the car's dashboard.
And that concept of not being able to trust our future selves brings us to the third example in the text, and this one is perhaps the most painful demonstration of this empathy gap.
Right, and it shifts from teenagers making risky choices to something very adult. Childbirth.
This one feels less about bad behavior and more about, as you said, the empathy gap. the inability to understand a future emotional or physical state.
Right. And the scenario is so familiar. A pregnant woman often decides in a cold state, months before labor begins, that she wants a natural birth. No painkillers, no epidural.
It's an admirable goal.
Yeah,
They want the purity of the experience. They've read the books. They have a plan.
right. They are committed. They've done the breathing exercises. They're ready.
But the author points out, they are making this incredibly important decision when they cannot actually imagine the pain. They are calm, they are comfortable, they are sitting on a soft couch in their cold state.
And then reality hits.
Then labor starts.
Yeah.
The hot state of intense, overwhelming pain takes over. And suddenly that cold state decision to refuse painkillers seems ridiculous. It seems like it was made by a complete stranger.
The source includes a really personal story here about the author Dan and his wife Sumi.
It does. Sumi wanted a natural birth. She was absolutely adamant. But Dan, being a behavioral researcher and a bit of a contrarian, suggested a test, the ice bucket test.
I feel like this is something only a behavioral economist would suggest to his pregnant wife. Honey, before you commit to this, let's run a little experiment. Put your hand in this ice water. It sounds like a recipe for divorce.
It was actually on the advice of a birth coach, believe it or not. But yes, the idea was to simulate intense, prolonged pain to see if her resolve held up. Sumi held her hands in ice water for 2 full minutes while Dan coached her on her breathing.
2 minutes in ice water is an eternity. If you've ever tried it, it's not just cold, it burns. It's a deep, aching pain.
It is agony.
Yeah.
And what was the result? Sumi realized her cold state decision was fundamentally flawed. The pain changed her perspective entirely.
And the text says that during the actual birth, any ounce of love Sumi ever had for her husband was completely transferred to the anesthesiologist.
That is a quote for the ages. The anesthesiologist becomes the hero of the story.
But the insight there is so profound. The text calls this the empathy gap. We cannot empathize with our future selves. When we are not in pain, we cannot truly understand what we will want when we are in pain.
Just like when we are not hungry, we underestimate how much junk food we'll want to eat later.
That's the perfect example. It's why you should never, ever go grocery shopping on an empty stomach. We've all done it.
Oh, absolutely.
You go in hungry, intending to buy salad and chicken, and you come out with 3 bags of chips, a frozen pizza, and a box of donuts.
Precisely. That is the hot state dictating what goes in your cart. And when you get home and you eat a sane dinner, you look at the chips and you ask yourself, who bought this? Mr. Hyde bought it.
So, okay, we've established that we have those two selves. We have the planner, Dr. Jekyll, and we have the doer, Mr. Hyde. And they don't talk to each other very well. This leads us to the biggest daily struggle for most of us. It's not necessarily date rape or childbirth. It's something much more mundane, but in the long run, just as destructive.
Procrastination.
The slow motion version of the exact same problem.
The text actually breaks down the etymology of the word.
Right.
Pro, meaning for, and cras, meaning tomorrow.
For tomorrow. Always for tomorrow. It's the art of giving up long-term goals for the immediate gratification of not doing something difficult right now.
It's pushing the pain into the future. And the source places this very personal, individual struggle in a massive macro context, the American economy as a whole.
Yeah, the savings crisis. This part of the reading was really eye-opening. The text compares the U.S. savings rate to the rest of the world, and it's not a pretty picture.
It's startling. The text notes that by 2006, the U.S. savings rate had dropped to -1%.
-1%? What does that even mean?
It means that, on average, people were spending more than they earned. They were going into debt just to fund their current lifestyle. Compare that to China's 50% savings rate or Europe's 20%.
We are a nation of Hydes. We want the stuff now, and we'll figure out how to pay for it tomorrow.
And the author connects this directly to closets.
This is my favorite part of the whole thing, the closet theory of consumerism. It's such a great visual history of how our desire has physically expanded to fill our homes.
Okay, walk us through this history of the closet.
So he looks at his own house in Cambridge, which was built in 1890. It didn't have any closets.
Not at all. Where did they put their stuff?
They didn't have stuff, not like we do. They had a wardrobe, maybe, a chest. But they didn't have piles and piles of clothes and gadgets. Then you jump to the 1940s. You start getting stand-up closets, just big enough to hang a few shirts and a suit.
Okay. Functional. Minimal.
Then the 1970s. The closets get deeper. Now they're deep enough for a fondue pot and some disco dresses. But today we have walk-in closets. We have entire rooms dedicated to storage. We have California closet systems. And yet,
We still fill them to the brim.
the text points out that we still fill them to the absolute brim. Our consumption expands to fill the space available.
It's the physical manifestation of our inability to delay gratification. We see, we want, we buy. And if the closet is full, we buy a bigger house or we rent a storage unit.
And we charge it. The text mentions the average family credit card debt was around $9,000 at the time of writing. It's that lava flow of hot emotion, seeing a new car, a new pair of shoes, a dessert on the menu overriding the cool rationality of, I should be saving for retirement.
Lava flow of hot emotion. I like that image. It really does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? It just consumes the logical path. It burns down the bridge to your future goals.
So we know why we fail. We vow to save or diet or study when we are cool, but the hot state always wins. The big question is, can we fix it? Is there a way to trick Hyde into doing what Jekyll wants?
And this brings us to the core experiment in Chapter 6, the classroom experiment.
This is such a classic setup. The author, Dan Ariely, uses his own students at MIT as guinea pigs.
The best kind of guinea pigs. They're smart, but they're still human and very prone to procrastination.
Absolutely. So the task was simple. The students had to write 3 papers over a 12-week semester.
Okay, standard college stuff. But he divided the classes into 3 different groups, or conditions, to test how they handled the deadlines.
Right. Let's look at these 3 groups. Group 1 is the dictatorial class.
Right. In this class, the professor sets the deadlines, week 4, week 8, week 12. They're strict. There's no flexibility. If you miss a deadline, you're penalized.
Which, as a former student, I know students usually hate. They want freedom. They want to manage their own time.
Which leads us directly to Group 2, the freedom class.
Let me guess. No deadlines.
No deadlines at all. Just turn everything in by the end of the semester. Complete and total flexibility. You can turn them all in on the very last day if you want.
Now, if you had asked me back in college which class I wanted to be in, I would have said, give me the freedom class, 100%. I can manage my own time. I'll do it when I'm ready.
And rationally, that makes perfect sense. A rational person, a Dr. Jekyll in the freedom class, could just set their own deadlines and stick to them. Or, as one student in the book named Gaurav pointed out, they could wait until the very end to maximize their research time.
Right. Gaurav's logic is sound. If you're a computer, you wait until the last possible second to submit to ensure the data you're using is as fresh and complete as possible.
But students aren't computers. Then there was the third group, the self-imposed class. This is the really interesting one. These students had to choose their own deadlines at the start of the semester. They could pick any 3 dates they wanted, but once they chose them, they were binding. If they missed their own chosen deadline, they got penalized.
So it's pre-commitment. They are Jekyll setting rules for their future Hyde. They are creating their own little OnStar system for homework.
Exactly. So place your bets. Which of the 3 classes got the best grades?
Well, based on everything we've talked about so far, my guess is the freedom class, the ones with no deadlines at all, did the absolute worst.
You nailed it. The freedom class had the worst grades by a significant margin. It was a disaster of total procrastination.
I'm not surprised.
Without any external structure, the hot state of distraction, dates, parties, ski trips, just sleeping in, pushed the work until the very end, and the quality suffered immensely. They drowned in the lava flow.
And the winner, the best grades.
The dictatorial class, the one with the external forced deadlines set by the professor.
So we're basically toddlers. We just need a parent to tell us when to do our homework for our own good.
In a way, yes. The external voice, the non-negotiable structure, works best. It removes the choice and therefore removes the temptation to procrastinate. But the self-imposed group, the middle ground, is where the real nuance lies.
Okay, so how did they do?
They finish right in the middle, on average. But when the researchers looked closer at the data from that group, they found something fascinating.
How was it?
The students in that group who recognized their own weakness, the ones who had the self-awareness to space their deadlines out evenly, basically mimicking the dictatorial class, they did just as well as the dictatorial group.
Ah, so the ones who had self-awareness won. The ones who knew my future self is lazy and unreliable and set strict deadlines for him.
Yes, they knew that their future selves would be lazy, so they used the tool of pre-commitment to handcuff their future selves. They treated themselves like they couldn't be trusted.
But the ones who didn't, the ones who thought they could handle the freedom.
The ones who bunched all their deadlines at the very end, like Gaurav thought was the rational thing to do, they failed. They fell into the classic trap of overestimating their own self-control.
They thought Future me will be energized and motivated and ready to work.
And future them was just as lazy and distractible as present them.
This is the key insight of the whole thing, isn't it? Self-control tools work, but only if you have the self-awareness to make them strict enough. You have to be a benevolent tyrant to your future self.
Exactly. It's not enough to say, I'll try to be good. You have to say, I know for a fact I will be bad, so I am going to create a penalty or a structure right now that forces me to be good later.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've looked at sexual arousal, reckless driving, childbirth, and now homework deadlines. It feels like these are very disparate parts of life, but the source material argues they are all just different faces of the exact same problem.
They are. The synthesis here is that we aren't a single unified being. We're an agglomeration of multiple selves. There is no fully integrated human being. There is no one you. There's the planner and there is the actor. There's the soul and there's the biology.
And the actor, Mr. Hyde, he doesn't care about the planner's beautiful spreadsheet.
Not one bit. He cares about the now. So the solution across the board in every one of these domains is pre-commitment. We need to create an authoritative external voice or mechanism to give orders to our future selves.
So for the students, it was the firm deadlines. What about for the rest of us? How do we apply this to real life outside the classroom?
Well, for health, it's things like automatic appointment scheduling. Don't wait until you need a checkup to call. Schedule the next one while you are literally walking out the door of the current one. You're locking it in before you have a chance to procrastinate.
And for finance?
Automatic deductions. The cookie jar method, but digitized and automated. Money that disappears from your paycheck and goes into savings or a 401k before you even see it.
Right. You're removing the decision from the hot state.
Exactly. If the money hits your main checking account, Hyde sees it and he wants to buy shoes or a new gadget. If it goes straight to the retirement account, Jekyll wins by default.
You're rigging the game in your own favor.
You have to. And the most sobering part of the text, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, is the learning curve, or rather, the complete lack of one.
Right. The Berkeley students, these weren't 12-year-olds having their first crush. They were young adults with sexual experience. They'd been aroused hundreds of times before.
And yet, all that experience didn't fix the prediction error. They still couldn't accurately predict their own behavior. The text explicitly states, we get it wrong even if we spend as much time in this state as our Berkeley students spend sexually aroused.
That is just so humbling. It means you can be 40 years old, you could have been angry 1,000 times in your life, and you will still underestimate what you will say or do the next time you get really angry.
We need systems, not willpower. Willpower is a resource. It's like a muscle that gets tired and it evaporates when emotions rise. Systems stay in place. The seatbelt works whether you are happy or sad. We need to build seatbelts for our decisions.
So if you're listening to this, the main takeaway is stop trusting your future self. That guy is a flake.
He's a wild card. He's fun at parties, but you should not let him manage the bank account or make important life decisions.
Treat him like a wild card. Build the guardrails now while you're the smart one. Okay, so let's wrap this up with a final thought. We've established that we are Jekyll and Hyde. We've established that we systematically overestimate our own self-control, and the only way to win is to rig the game while we are rational.
That's the summary, yes.
But this raises a really provocative question for me, and I want to leave the listener with this. If we truly have these two distinct selves, the rational planner and the emotional actor, does the rational self have the moral right to completely control the emotional self?
Ooh, that is a deep philosophical question. It borders on rights theory almost.
I mean, think about it. We assume Dr. Jekyll is the real us, the good us. But Mr. Hyde is us too. When we lock the credit card or set the car to play classical music or force a deadline on ourselves, we are essentially acting as a dictator over our own future experiences. We're telling our future self, you don't get a vote in this.
It's true. We are disenfranchising our future emotional selves. But the flip side of that question is, if we know Mr. Hyde exists, and we know he has a tendency to drive safely off a cliff, is it negligent not to treat him like a teenager who needs supervision? Is it not our responsibility to protect him from himself?
So is it self-care or is it self-tyranny? Where's the line?
Maybe it's just responsible parenting of yourself. Maybe love, including self-love, is realizing that part of you just needs firm boundaries to be safe and successful.
I like that. Parenting yourself, sometimes you have to be the strict dad to your own inner teenager.
Yes. And sometimes that means turning off the Tupac and putting on some Schumann.
Well, on that note, we encourage you to go find your own OnStar system before you hit the road of life today, whatever that looks like for you. Lock the fridge, cut up the credit card, schedule the appointment. Do it now while you're smart.
Before the heat turns up.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.